when you go into a movie theater and you watch the protagonist, you basically adopt his or her frame of reference, and then you see the whole world that's portrayed on the screen through the eyes of the person that you're identifying with. That's part of our capacity for imitation. So basically what you do, what you do there is, like if you're talking to someone else and you adopt their frame of reference, it's not exactly a cognitive operation. What you seem to do is, first of all, come to some understanding about what it is that they want, and so that's the goal. Once you know what they want, you can represent them in your body. So it's almost like you're playing them as a simulation on your own biological platform. And then you can infer from your own emotional responses, if you also simulate the situation that they're in, what their emotions are, and that enables you to understand other people. So we're these weird biological computers that are capable of running other psyches on our biological platform, and that makes us able to imitate and also to understand each other. So that's a basic narrative. I was here and I'm trying to go there. And so if you're asking your kindergarten kid what they did today at school and teaching them to tell a story, they might say, well, I was at home and then Mom took me to kindergarten. It's like not a very exciting story, but it's a story. And then a little more exciting story might be, I was at home, my mom took me to school, and on the way there a big dog ran up to the fence and barked at me. And the right question that would follow that story is, okay, what did you do? And that's a real story, because the kid says, well look, I was in this frame of reference and I was aiming at goal A, B actually, I was aiming at point B, and while I was aiming at point B and acting out the processes that would lead me there, something unexpected happened. That's a story. And then you say, well, what did you do? And the kid might say, well, you know, I was really scared and I hid behind Mom. Or, so that would be one response, and we still went to kindergarten and I was okay. It's pretty good, pretty good. Or the kid might say, well, I wasn't scared at all, because I know that if you stand up to dogs, they usually leave you alone. And we went to kindergarten and that was okay. And, you know, the kid is trying to tell, really, they're trying to tell a little hero story. And if they're successful in the encounter with the thing that's unknown, then they triumph as a consequence of their encounter with the unexpected, and poof, you know, that's successful adaptation. You pat them on the head and you say, yeah, that's really good. And they kind of smile, and, you know, you're teaching them how to comprehend their existence in a narrative structure, and you're also teaching them what that narrative structure should be. So this is like a meta-narrative, and the meta-narrative says you were going from point A to point B, that's the oval on the left, and then something completely bizarre happened, like I was betrayed. And then I was in this terrible place for quite a long period of time, a chaotic place, but I learned a bunch, and I put myself back together, and I'm a wiser person as a consequence of the encounter. Right? Everyone knows that story. And that's paradise, paradise lost, paradise regained. It's a cultural meta-narrative. And it's a story that it's a human story. It's an apocalyptic story. That's why everybody's always all apocalyptic about everything, right? Apocalypse of the week. We're going to run out of oil. We're going to run out of gas. There's too much carbon dioxide. The Chinese are going to take over the world. We're ruining the ecology. The ocean's running out of fish. You know, the world is getting too hot. It was getting too cold in 1970 when I was about your age. It's like apocalypse of the week. Why? Because things fall apart. And because they can fall apart completely, and they often do. And so everyone's always on the alert for like the next potential apocalypse, and it's no wonder. You know, it's a permanent characteristic of life that things can radically fall apart. Now, luckily, it's a permanent characteristic of life that they can actually also radically come back together. And it turns out that whether or not they radically come together depends to some degree on how you choose to act when they fall apart. What is the pre-cosmogonic chaos? This is from William James, who was a pragmatist who lived on the East Coast at about the end of the 1800s. He was one of the founders of modern psychology. He liked to sniff nitrous oxide, which is a hallucinogen. He was sort of like the world's first major league hippie, and he wrote sort of hippie poetry as a consequence of his nitrous oxide experimentation. And here's part of what he derived from his experiences. So, pure experience is the name which I give to the original flux of life before reflection has categorized it. Only newborn babes and persons in semi-coma from sleep, drugs, illnesses, or blows can have an experience pure in the literal sense of a that which is not yet any definite what. potential. Potential. Because you might think, well, what's the world made of? It's made out of actuality, right? But that's not how you act. You act as if the world's made out of potential, and you interact with that potential. And what James is saying is that there are times when you experience something that's akin to relatively pure potential. And then you might ask yourself whether or not potential is real, which is a really interesting question. But I can say, regardless of how you answer that question, you act as if it's real. And you'll also feel guilty if someone that you love comes up to you and says, you're not living up to your potential. It's like, what the hell does that mean? What does it mean? It means you're not becoming that which you could be. Well, what is that? It's like, you know, we're materialists. How are we going to measure that? You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't measure it, right? But nonetheless, it's like the substance of being. And being is potential as well as actuality. And we're grappling always with the potential. And so that's what James is talking about. Pure potential. I like to think of it as latent information. Full both of oneness and manyness, but in respects that don't appear. Changing throughout, yet so confusedly that its phases interpenetrate. Sounds like the yin and yang symbol. And no points either of distinction or of identity can be caught. Here's his poem. No verbiage can give it, because the verbiage is other. Incoherent, coherent, the same. And it fades, and it's infinite, and it's infinite. Don't you see the difference? Don't you see the identity? Constantly opposites united. The same me telling you to write and not to write. Extreme, extreme, extreme. Something and other than that thing. Intoxication and otherness than intoxication. Every attempt at betterment, every attempt at otherment is it fades forever and forever as we move. Eliade says, now as we know for archaic and traditional cultures, the symbolic return to chaos is equivalent to preparing a new creation. So the death of your current state of being can be the preparation for a new being. Now, one of the things the psychoanalysts say, and this is implicit in Eliade's discussion of the shamanic transformation, is if you do this voluntarily, you have a much better chance of doing it successfully. So the rule is, well, if you go out to hunt for a dragon, and you're in pretty good shape while you're doing it, and you're all prepared, then the day... thing might not eat you, but if you're lying in bed and you're covered with cheesy dust and you're hungover from 3 days worth of drinking, then the dragon will just eat you, and it's probably a good thing for everyone that it did. So the point is, be prepared, and part of the way that you're prepared is by being awake and having the many sources of power that are at your fingertips, that are part of your biological and cultural inheritance at the ready, so that you can respond. It follows that we may interpret the psychic chaos of the future shaman as a sign that the profane man is being dissolved and a new personality being prepared for birth. Transformation. Constant theme. Paradise, paradise lost, and redemption. That's the story of mankind. We're in a fallen state. Why is that? Well, because things aren't perfect and they could be better, and everyone's suffering. So things have fallen apart. They're always in the state of being fallen apart. And what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to put them back together. It's the eternal story of mankind, that. Now, Henri Ellenberger, who was an existentialist psychotherapist, and who was a leader of the existentialist movement in the 1950s, and also a profound student of psychoanalysis, talked about something he characterized as a creative illness, which was something that manifested itself in Freud and in Jung, and in other people like Viktor Frankl. for example, who went through periods of extreme, and Darwin, extreme periods of chaotic disruption as their new theories were manifesting themselves, because the new theories tore them apart as they were being developed. And they paid a tremendous personal price for that. But generally they were able to reorganize themselves within the context of the new theory, and that made their stance more powerful and more complete than it was before. He described the characteristic elements of the creative illness as follows. It succeeds a period of intense preoccupation with an idea and search for a certain truth. It's a polymorphous condition that can take the shape of depression, neurosis, psychosomatic ailments, or even psychosis. Whatever the symptoms, they are felt as painful, if not agonizing, by the subject, with alternating periods of alleviation and worsening. Throughout the illness, the subject never loses the thread of his dominating preoccupation. It's often compatible with normal professional activity and family life. But even if he keeps to his social activities, he's almost entirely absorbed with himself. He suffers from feelings of utter isolation, even when he has a mentor who guides him through the ordeal, like the shaman apprentice with his master. The termination is often rapid and marked by a phase of exhilaration. The subject emerges from his ordeal with a permanent transformation in his personality and the conviction that he has discovered a great truth or a new spiritual world. Also happened to Piaget. Many of the 19th and 20th century figures recognized universally as great, Nietzsche, Darwin, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Freud, Jung, were also additionally characterized by lengthy periods of profound psychological unrest and uncertainty.